I'm going to talk about geoengineering, environmental and health effects of jet plane pollution. And there's a reason why I have chosen the word pollution, because I want to give you some tools by this speech, which is partly scientific, to understand what is going on in the sky. And when we are talking about pollution, we are not talking about a conspiracy, because actually geoengineering and chemtrails is one of the biggest conspiracies there are in the conspiracy world. So when we go on, I hope that we afterwards that you have got some tools to address your local communities, your local environmental protection agencies, to about this very, very huge problem, which we can see on the sky. And when I came here on Thursday, the sky was totally without any chemtrails or geoengineered, so I was thinking, oh my God, how shall I talk about something which isn't here? But my friends have started spraying all over the sky, and I want to walk you through that. Just a small presentation of myself. My name is Frank Rasmussen. I'm born in '66. I'm educated mechanical engineer from Aarhus in Denmark. I am an entrepreneur. I work with a lot of different kind of projects, and I own an engineering company where I work in the field of environmental technologies in wastewater treatment plants and industries. So also in my professional, I work with environment, and environment is important for me. The definition of geoengineering is actually described by one of the key scientists, David Keith, and he said that geoengineering is the intentional large-scale manipulation of the environment, particularly manipulation that is intended to reduce undesired human-caused climate change. And geoengineering also have another term called solar radiation management, which is called SRM, where you are controlling the amount of sunlight before it actually reaches the planet. And another way of calling it is also stratospheric aerosol geoengineering. So it's actually the same thing, so don't get confused when you read about this. So just to make sure you have the term. There are different kind of geoengineering methods, and I put a circle around the one I'm going to talk about, which is actually cloud seeding. But Bill Gates Foundation is financing also geoengineering, where they are having big boats putting up, spraying up salt water in order to create aerosols, and the aerosols is actually the basis to create clouds. And all this intact with the destruction of our Earth by all the multinational companies. They are coming up with solutions. Not that we actually are living in harmony with the Earth, but we have to have technical solutions to live on this Earth. And geoengineering is one of them. The latest one I just took for you is actually that they can control the weather by using laser beams. So I was just thinking when I read the article about that, what a nice thing, maybe we can avoid the chemtrails and they're using lasers instead of that. But controlling the weather is absolutely possible with this kind of technology, and I will give you the foundation of how it works. My interest in geoengineering is because I've been sailing since 1970, and this is a picture from the coast of my parents' summer house where I have my catamaran. A beautiful area, and when you sail, and also sail a lot of regattas, you look at the sky, because if you want to sail fast, you need to be on the edge of a clouds, especially the cumulus clouds. So sailing and looking at clouds actually is necessary. So I began to realize that the skies were changing. In Denmark, it actually happens really bad around the COP15 climate meeting that was in Copenhagen, where Obama was flown in and all traffic was stopped and everything. from that time on, I began to notice a really change in the sky. And in order to verify that, I went through all my digital photos from actually year of 2000 and say, am I right in that the number of persistent contrails in the sky is increased? And that's absolutely right. So I can give you, go home, watch your own digital photos. Maybe you do it and remember a good trip you had together, but when you do that, look at the sky. When I watch film, I look at the sky. Every time I'm looking up. And that is also important for you guys. If you find any of this information I'm presenting for you today interesting, start to look up, talk to your community about it as well. There are maybe some young people here who have never realized other things than the sky we have today. So I'm a pretty old man. This is how the sky looked in the good old days. What you see is that a plane is passing and you have a small contrail after it. And you never saw a big, long, persistent contrail. When this is playing, I can tell you there are persistent contrails, which is natural. I will give you the reason when they can be natural. It's very, very rare. And there are what is called artificial persistent contrail, which is the contrail after the airplane which stays on the sky, which I will call a chemtrail. So you have a natural persistent contrail and you have a chemtrail. Natural persistent contrail is very rare, so don't get upset if you miss that. So we actually made a time-lapse video of the typical sky today in Denmark. As you can see on the flag, this is played pretty fast. But if we just look out here, we see that a lot of lines after the jet planes is coming. And this is both civilian jet planes and it's also military jet planes. And actually you already have some tools by Flight Radar 24 to use that on your telephone to see, because normally the civilian airplanes have a transponder signal which goes to a database and you will see it on your smartphone. So if you don't see it, it's a pretty high chance that it is a military plane. In order for you to have an idea about this pollution from the airplanes, I will just show you a video about how the air traffic in the world with the civilian airplanes are moving. And as you can see, United States is awake but going to sleep, and Europe is starting to wake up. And that all these planes you see here is flying all over the world, and about 12,000 planes are always in the air, and to that comes about 1,000, 2,000 military planes. And a jumbo jet uses about 150,000 liters of fuel when it actually flies 10 hours. And flying in is not a very bad thing for the environment if it was done with the right kind of fuel, because the consumption of an airplane is actually the same as a car where you're sitting 4 people. So if you're thinking about going out flying, you're not causing much more damage than doing on the road, but you're doing it at 900 kilometers. So it's a very efficient way to be transported. The problem is that if we look at the civilian side, that there is absolutely no regulation, or very rare regulation. And also the transport with all this cheap travel is increasing. So about 3% per year, and as you can see in 12 there were over 30 million registered takeoff. And if you look at the revenue of the total mileage is 5.4 trillion, that means that one person is flying around the earth 135 million times. So a lot of transport also with cargo is happening. It's very easy to be confused when we are talking about geoengineering and chemtrails, because some days the sky looks like this, and of course there is an explanation for that. The one explanation is which I will come back to in a little bit, that the amount of nanoparticles in the atmosphere is so limited that they are not able to create sky condensation nuclei. But there are also technologies actually to evaporate condensation trail, which of course is used by spy flights, military stuff. In the old days, you didn't use microwave to dissipate the contrail. You used alcohol and combinations of that. So even in that, there have been a lot of development. So most of the lines you see on the sky is actually caused by civilian airplanes, but I have this video here done by Tanker Enemy, which is actually a live presentation of American KC-10 tanker. And it's like that after the Cold War stopped, the US military and NATO had about 700 planes, tanker planes, which were used to tank up the B-52 in order to bomb Russia if they send a missile against the United States. These tankers are not used anymore because we are not in a Cold War yet. They're working on it, but we are not there yet. So what you see here is that it actually, the whole wing, normally you will expect that if you have from the ground a condensation trail, that it would come from the motors. But here you see it come from the whole wing. And there are a lot of patents describing this. They have, you see now it actually, in a small time, it starts actually to make a line again. It's not possible to see this from the ground because there are skies below. But if you see something where it starts and stops and starts and stops, it could most probably be a tanker or a drone actually out to make a layer of nanoparticles. It's very critical to have nanoparticles. Without a nanoparticle, you cannot create clouds. I will explain that for you in a short moment. There are subliminal programming going on in all aspects of our life, in commercials, as you see here, and even with Lego, as you saw, with Audi. If you use My Start as a start page, you will always be confronted with chemtrails or geoengineering in one another way, and most probably in very, very beautiful pictures. But the sky have not always been looking like that. And I'm just going to show you the worst example I ever found about a commercial. This is a commercial from O2, the telecommunication company who have bought a lot of places where bands are playing. But this, I noticed that the kids are dressed like the deaf, that kids are being sprayed, that kids breathe bubbles, which could mean that oxygen is insufficient, and kids is only SMS. That means they're disconnected from each other.
Z tohto naozaj stratíte reč a prestanete vnímať všetko okolo seba.
I think this is one of the worst examples, about what is going on in our society. You use it in commercials, and most probably no one gets the message, It's really nasty. So everywhere you go, this is actually going on. Also in the education system, you have it here from NASA, where it's for teachers and authors, where kids can use this scheme over there to describe what they see on the sky, and you have shorted, you have persistent spreading, like it was totally natural. So the conspiracy in this is absolutely real, and it's beginning from our kids. And most kids have never seen other skies, so why should they know how a sky looked in the old days? Just to see, I think it's a chemtrail, and then they go through the educational system, and in the end they think it's all contrails. I like this drawing, so I had it. So I will try to come up with a scientific explanation why chemtrails is created in the sky, and what is especially important here is that you focus on nanoparticles. Nanoparticles is the key. There are different kind of clouds. What I'm going to talk about is I saw it, cirrus aviaticus, which is actually clouds created by airplanes. But we have actually, 3 different kind of clouds. We have cumulus clouds, we have stratus clouds, and we have cirrus clouds. And cirrus clouds, as you can see, is from 8 kilometers and up, and is also what is here called cirrus aviaticus. If you take the cumulus, the good weather clouds, they are actually created by hot air going up and condensing. So they are based on water. But when we get up in 8 or 10 or 12 kilometers, the temperature is minimum minus 38 degrees. So up there, the skies are created on ice. And the funny thing, when I did all this research, I was thinking, okay, maybe humidity was increased in the atmosphere, because the higher humidity it is, the easier it is to create a cloud. But what I actually saw, and the blue line here is actually about 10 kilometers, is actually that the humidity has fallen. And that means today there are actually 13% less chance. Let me say in another way, this means that heat from the Earth can easier escape to space than it could in 1948. So that means the global warming debate is actually much less today, 13% less than it was in the 50s. So, and what IPCC say that water vapor is a more potent greenhouse gas than CO2. And how many of you know how much CO2 there are in the atmosphere? Is it 10%, 20%, less than 1%? Yeah, 0.04%. That is how much CO2 there is. If we look at how much that is of the total atmosphere, I'm pretty amazing how much energy the media and the scientific community have put in 0.04% of the atmosphere. So what is actually happening is that the humidity in the space is very important if you want to talk about natural created persistent contrails. But there are 3 things which is necessary there. You need to have minus 38 degrees, that is 8 kilometers height. You need to have oversaturated air, that means that the humidity in the atmosphere is over 100%, and you need to have no wind conditions. And I've been studying, Wyoming University have all weather balloons in the whole world is placed in a database which you can access via the internet. And I have been studying a lot of PDF from all over the world to see if the humidity was over 100%, over 8 kilometers. And I have never found it. Really, never found it. But that doesn't change that the scientific community, they already know that aviation is a part of causing this cloud. They talk about what is called the indirect effect, where they state that aviation is likely to cause cloud formation using a different mechanism. Air-emitting particles, and there the particle word come in, also called aerosols, which can act as a nuclei on which the water can condense. And this is from the Danish Weather Institute. So, when I began to do my research, I actually had this book called The Chilling Stars, which is a book about a lot of things going on the Earth. And Svensmark is a Danish scientist who actually took a battle with the whole scientific community about global warming. And he tells a story in his book where he actually was freezing out in a big conference, and when he should talk, he was booed about 200 of his colleagues, because it's important for you to understand that the system is so centralized and controlled. So if you want to do research in other things than CO2 or something which is popular, then you are not getting any money for your projects. So in that way, it's possible to control that we research a lot in a very limited parameter. So when this guy Svensmark come out and say that cosmic rays play unsuspected role in making everyday clouds, and during the last 100 years cosmic rays became scarcer because usually vigorous actions by the sun bedded many of them away. Fewer cosmic rays meant fewer clouds and a warmer world. Since 1995, cosmic rays increased again, creating more cumulus clouds, decreasing the global temperature. And I added geoengineering chemtrails create artificial cirrus clouds. And it's important to understand that the skies have different kind of function. You know, when you are laying at the beach and a nice big cumulus cloud is coming around, the temperature around you is dropping really badly. Maybe 5 degrees, and you say, go away, I want to have the sun. Not here in Portugal. You are just, oh, thank you. Especially when you are a Viking. But the reason for that is that the sun is reflected back into space by the clouds. So what Svensmark means that it has a really big purpose to regulate it like a thermostat. But the cirrus cloud is creating a kind of blanket all around the world. So the sun is coming through, but the heat cannot get out. So cirrus cloud is actually creating global warming. So what you're seeing on the sky with all this global dimming, which is a lot of nanoparticles working as a sky condensation nuclei, is actually a blanket which is trapping the heat, is not coming out. And he explains this very beautifully. Clouds is created by exploding supernovas and stars million years ago out in the Milky Way, where the cosmic rays from that, which have the energy to overcome the sun magnetic field, the Earth magnetic field, and the Earth atmosphere, is raining, you can say raining down on the Earth, and there are created what is called a chemical reaction, which is creating an aerosol. This aerosol is acting together with the humidity which is already in the atmosphere, and because it's very cold, or this steam going up from a hot land, this aerosol function as a cloud condensation nuclei. And a lot of aerosols, a lot of particles, a lot of nanoparticles, where it's either condensed as a water vapor or condensed higher up as ice, is actually creating cloud cover. It's pretty simple. And now Svensmark is absolutely not alone. So if you research the cloud project, him and I think 12 other scientists in CERN are working with this theory and creating, artificial cloud chambers to see how different kind of electromagnetic radiation and cosmic rays create the cloud cover. So I find it interesting because, as Svensmark, he states that it takes actually a nanoparticle of maximum 100 nanometer. A nanometer is 1 billion of a meter. It's nothing, you cannot see it. And that is also problematic. But when it comes from cosmic rays, it's not so much problem. When it comes from airplanes, so I was thinking, okay, Svensmark, he states it takes 100 nanometer particle to work as a cloud condensation nuclei. Is there any way to find out what is coming out of the exhaust of a jet plane? And luckily there was, not luckily for this guy, but there was a guy who worked as with a bagage in Copenhagen Airport, and he got ill as in the age of 39, got cancer. So his union actually demanded that the air quality in the airport should be tested. So the airport and Copenhagen University and Technical University worked together with the union in order to put up particle measurement stations, and you can see the different places here in Copenhagen Airport. And it was very interesting what they actually find out. And if you look at the graph here, you cannot see it, but the graph up in the corner, you can see you have 100 nanometers on the x-axis, and about 90% of all the particles coming out of the jet plane measured in Kastrup Airport were under 100 nanometer. So that actually fits very good in the theory that we need a nanoparticle in order to make a cloud. So this baggage handler, actually they calculated that he inhaled 240 billion nanoparticles per workday. They said, we don't know much about the health effects, but it's not healthy for him. That was the conclusion. And of course, in fuel from airplanes, there are it's nearly unregulated, and it's a very poorly refined quality of fuel. So what they also found out is that jet fuel actually contains a high concentration of sulfur, about 1,000 ppm. If you combine that with a diesel car and the regulations there are here on ground, it's 10 ppm, so it's 100 times worse. And when you actually are burning that in a jet motor, which is a very efficient motor, you're creating 1,000 times more particles, because there are no particle filter on a jet motor. And especially with sulfur, it's really problematic, because sulfur released in 10 to 12 kilometers up is actually in the area where our ozone layer is. And ozone is called O3, and is a very unstable molecule which wants to react with whatever there is to react. So when you have sulfur coming out there, the ozone will react with it immediately and actually cause acid rain, but it will also deplete the ozone layer. And many of the old, in the 80s, where the CFC gas you use for refrigerators and also for deodorants and things like that, that was banned. Many of these old things, old stuff, old chemicals are reacting because a lot of particles is sprayed out. So I began to research if there were any particle sizes, related to geoengineering, to SRM or stratospheric, and I found this report called An Overview of Geoengineering of Climate Using Stratospheric Sulfur Aerosols. And in this report there also states that with the jet exhaust nanoparticles of approximately 10 to 80 nanometers, that they're working as a cloud condensation nuclei. So, and what is important to know here is that the smaller the particle, the more stable the water droplet. That means the lesser rainfall, and that is what many call geoengineering. So a lot of the conspiracies about chemtrails, and I will come to the lab test we have done on rainwater in multiple countries in the next slide. But in order for you to see is that I found this scientific database and report where they state here, on the basis of their uses in jet fuels and munition, the most likely scenario for aluminum nanoparticles exposure is inhalation. And what is very important here is that all these nanoparticles coming out from jet plane, intentionally or unintentionally, civilian or military, is a problem, because we don't have any way of protecting ourselves against it. Our natural barriers, biological barriers, are not working against nanoparticles. That means when we breathe in air in, if it's particulates from cars or particulates from military or civilian airplanes, it simply goes through our brain barrier and deposits our brain. And it's very difficult to get rid of. So nanoparticles is, of course, a lot of positive possibilities with nanoparticles. It's the same with all kind of technology. It has a dark side and has a good side. But what we are experiencing here is absolutely the dark side. So in order to make sure that we are not talking about a conspiracy, I have a big group of people all over the world working, taking water samples. That means we have a glass where we put it up. It's not a metal thing which could pollute the sample. We send it to a certified lab and we have it analyzed. And the special thing is about, if you see this from Sweden here, is that you can see the percentages in the scheme in the middle to the right. And you see that actually silver is very high. And most probably some of you have heard about when there was the Olympic in China, that they sprayed it with silver iodide on the front coming to Beijing in order to avoid too much rain, because actually the Olympics in China was held when you had a raining season. So it's with silver iodide you make the water droplets, and it's possible to make it rain before it actually hit the city. And when this year in Denmark we had over 1 meter of rain. It was the worst summer I ever had. It was impossible to sail because it's raining all the time. Maybe we have 2 sunny days, then we have 14 days with rain. And I talked to my Swedish colleagues, and they say the same story. And at the same time, again, I could read that the harvest in Russia, which is the next country from Sweden, actually dropped 30% because they have drought. Is that a coincidence, or does it have something to do with weather manipulation? There are also measurements, as you can see, of uranium and other stuff. I have done some measurement in Denmark where you see aluminium, you see barium, you see strontium. And this, the reason why I have specific asked to measure for that is in all the patterns I go through, I actually, about geoengineering, those are the stuff which is important. Here's actually a lab test from Portugal, and there are also aluminium and barium. There's some measure for zinc. There are a lot of scientists working in the world trying to get this geoengineering problem on the agenda. And Deborah Whitman is one of them who have made analyses on dying plants and trees. And look at the level she finds on aluminium. In my professional job, I see the same problems. I have a problem where I work with a wood chip fired power plant, and the condensate for that is filled with heavy metals. Trees and plants is fantastic to actually soak up heavy metals. And that means when we eat it, we actually get it into our body. And also, we have here Francis Mangels, who is, how many of you have seen What in the World of Spring? Ah, a few, yeah. I can recommend that you see that and Why in the World of Spring. Pretty good documentary film about this problem here. But he measured, he had been working as a biologist in the northern part of California. And he actually measured 20,000 times more of aluminium in the ground than there should be on natural. And he's been working with this for many, many years, so he knows what he's talking about. The scientific community have been receiving huge amount of funds in order to research geoengineering. I just have a patent here, and what is important for you to notice is down here where they state that the method of claim, blah, 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 blah. The method of claim here is, let me see, they mention here aluminium oxide, thorium oxide, and in a lot of other patents we see barium sulfate and the other stuff we measure for. So I will not go through all this because I don't have time for it. There's a lot of patents which also explain what you saw from the military plane, how the whole wing could actually make a chemtrail. So when you start researching this, I can only open a little bit door for you if you find what I'm telling you here reasonable, and you have to do your own research, because I can assure you the rabbit hole is deep here, really deep. But it's very exciting, and you most probably would find it interesting to look at this. Geoengineering Watch actually have been so nice to make lists from 1920, where the whole controlling the weather geoengineering thing started. So it's nearly 100 years ago, and mankind always had a hope to control the weather. You know, even the Indians were standing with a stick and make it rain. But that was in a good way. Now we're using a technical way. So I just go through all this. There are about 25 to 30 patents on each page. So that is a lot of funding going into research here. And that is very funny, because when you're talking to the government or the EPA in Denmark or anybody who could have a clue about what is going on, they are absolutely quiet, you know, they ignore you. And with this amount of money put into geoengineering and different kind of way to spread it, find out how conductive they are, it's pretty amazing that the government, which is paid by my tax paying, is not doing anything. So, briefly, what I'm going to go into now is what this nanoparticle layer, which is created over our head, works as a conductor for different kind of technologies. The nanoparticles which rain down and we inhale make us to better antennas. That means when we are hit by Wi-Fi and cell phone mast electromagnetic radiation, we will trap more of that. Another thing is also that it pollutes our soil, and Monsanto, which is a well-known company for have made no product which will benefit the humans, have really gone into the GMO business. And don't listen to the talk about GMO will save the planet, because GMO is about business and is about controlling the food supply, as Kissinger have said earlier. And what is important for you to know here, just to have a little bit of taste of what is going on, is actually that Monsanto is also selling Roundup. And what Roundup does with the active stuff called glyphosate is actually it attaches all the metals. So that means when you're spraying a lot of nanoparticles, heavy metals, and they are in the soil and you afterwards are using Roundup, you are actually concentrating the amount. It's not going to the groundwater, it's being concentrated in the earth, in the fields. So that means that on a certain level it will be impossible to grow conventionally corn or seeds in any way. Then you need to buy the GMO, and that is what is going on. Another thing which is very is how many of you have heard about HARP? Ah, that's pretty good. HARP is what is known as an ionosphere heater. You know, we have the troposphere, the stratosphere, and the ionosphere. The ionosphere is a plasma layer around 90 kilometers up in the sky, and it works as a mirror. It reflects radio waves back. Also, the television signal you see at home, if it's not used by satellite but the old system, is actually reflected. That's also why when you are driving in your car and listening to the radio, for the local radio, you have to change the frequency, because the signal is going out like that and reflecting back and becoming weaker and weaker and weaker. What is important with a HARP installation is that they have an antenna plant, which consists of hundreds of antennae. And HARP is the most powerful one. It's about 3.5 million watts. If you combine that with a cell phone mast, it's 20 watts. So we are talking here about a really powerful generator of electromagnetic frequencies. And what is also important to know is that when a cell phone is allowed, the signal acts, you know, the strength of the signal, the radiation is getting less and less the longer you get away from the mast. With this HARP, you are able to concentrate the electromagnetic waves reflected in the ionosphere and reflected back. So it's like playing billiard, the angle in and the angle out. So that means there are about 20 known facilities, not as powerful as HARP, but pretty powerful, which means the whole Earth can be covered with this. What is happening is when this antenna is sending this electromagnetic wave out, it's actually pulsing it, and reflecting it back from the ionosphere on the top of the clouds. So we see it below, and you're able to see when weather modification is going on. It could be weather modification, it could also be a sort of mind control. My research goes a lot into mind control on a scientific basis. So weather modification is actually used, and I find to make it simple, what is happening when you're spreading out all these nanoparticles, intentionally or unintentionally, it doesn't matter, is that it traps the humidity. And you know, the smaller they are, the less chance there are for rain. And if you're only having a lot of nanoparticles, which we also call global dimming, with this white layer, Normally, when I was young, there was a really deep blue sky, and you had the clouds, you know, it was beautiful. Today you have actually a Milky Way. It's very rare, very deep blue. And all these nanoparticles creating this global dimming is trapping all the humidity in the atmosphere. And it can trap a lot of humidity. The more nanoparticles, the smaller they are, the more humidity can be trapped. But you can use the electromagnetic waves which comes up and hit all these metals, nanoparticles, which work as a conductor for the electromagnetic waves. And they start to vibrate like when you're putting your coffee into a microwave oven. And when they start to vibrate, the air gets hotter, and they actually are the altitude of the nanoparticles are going up. The air are getting hotter and hotter. More and more water can be. The hotter the air you have, the more water you have. And in the end, the water droplets, also because the nanoparticles go together because of the electromagnetic, the electric surface conduction, it actually comes down as rain. So there's an explanation why you have all this. Charles, he told me he showed me a map where he said all Midwest were not having any rain for months, and the harvest was very, very bad. So that means you actually have a weapon here which you can use to destroy the harvest in the country, or destroy it for your own citizens. So it's a very, very powerful tool. So if you combine the chemtrails, the nanoparticles, with electromagnetic radiations from ionosphere heaters, you actually have windy and heavy rain. And when these nanoparticles are going up, because the hot air is going up, it's creating a vacuum below it. So when you already have a natural front coming in from the west, and you create a vacuum here, you actually are increasing this front. So if you see the very severe storms we had, you know, whole forests who were laid down, is because the forests are not, they're not, you know, by evolution made to have this kind of wind speed, because we normally don't have it. But if you can actually make a vacuum artificially, which the natural front coming in want to fill out, because it's an empty space, the levels of the wind is increasing a lot, and the trees are simply not designed to do that. Another aspect of HARP, and I took this photo here a day where I should play tennis, and you know, it's a beautiful cloud. And this is the way actually that you can see that a HARP or an ionosphere heater is in action. You have a lot of nanoparticles being spread about civilian or military planes. Before I just go to this, you have to know that there have to be a certain amount of nanoparticles in order to create this chemtrail. So the days where I was nearly forgetting that, but it's a very important thing. You remember I showed you the plane where there were no contrail at all. That means the humidity is very low, and there are very less nanoparticles, either by other jet planes or by exploding stars, creating aerosols. But what I believe is happening is that during the night, because actually the whole scheme have changed, we can go to bed with a beautiful blue sky, and in the morning you can actually see that there's a front over your head made by artificial clouds. And I believe that is drones and military planes, which during the night is simply working on creating an artificial weather front where they can use the HARP to attack that certain area. But the amount of nanoparticles, which is from 8 to 12 kilometers high, is then on a level. So when a civilian plane are coming through, creating a lot of nanoparticles, which you saw in the investigation done by the Copenhagen University, it creates actually a chemtrail. So in order for a civilian plane to make a chemtrail, as I could be wrong, so investigate yourself too. For a civilian plane to make a chemtrail, you need a certain amount of nanoparticles already in the atmosphere. That's also why maybe you have noticed that you have a cloud and then you have an airplane coming and it's making a short chemtrail trail just around the cloud, and then you have no again. That means because the cloud is already in the atmosphere where the airplanes are flying, consisting of ice crystals. There are nanoparticles there. It could be natural, like Svensmark sphery, but it could also be because it's simply laid out there to create a conductor for weather modification. And when we look about the possibility with HARP and ionosphere heaters, it's really, really scary, because ionosphere heaters, and especially HARP, have the possibility to create electromagnetic radiation from 1 to gigahertz. It's a huge, huge range. And if you look at what is called extreme low frequency, they really have a big importance for us, because we are electrical beings. Electromagnetic radiation field at 60 hertz double the activity of the cells, and I don't want to say this word, which involved in DNA and cell reproduction as related to cancer. So that means that if we are sick and actually are hit by 60 hertz, our cancer will grow faster. That's also why having Wi-Fi and electromagnetic equipment and cell mast around a hospital is simply crazy, because the DNA is simply damaged by this. So HARP have a potential to make something called cyclotron resonance, which is actually to, when we inhale a chemical, the chemical have a frequency code. And by this frequency code, if that is the same frequency coming from HARP, they are enhancing it, like we have actually inhaled a lot more aluminium. So you can, with HARP, doing a lot of bad things. I'm only giving you a little bit of perspective here. Another thing is that EMF decreases dopamine, which is one of the reasons of Parkinson's disease. It can be induced in your body, creating memory loss. It breaks your DNA. So, and also, if you sleep with your cell phone on while you are sleeping, you're actually, the amount of melatonin you are creating is less. And melatonin is a super hormone who's cleaning up the free radicals and rebuilding your cells during the night. So from a health perspective, it's really, really bad with all this, because the body is an electric machine. And about mind control, Jose Delgado, he was actually, I think he was Spanish. In 1985, he found out that frequency control of the people's brain chemistry in huge area takes only 1/5 energy of the Earth electromagnetic radiation field. If we look at the electromagnetic field we have today compared with the Stone Age people, it's 200,000 bigger. But the Earth radiation, we will not work without electromagnetic field. Maybe some of you have heard about Schumann's resonance. We need this electromagnetic field to work as humans. But it can be manipulated, and only 1/5 energy of that is enough to hack on the frequency of our brain, according to scientists. I can, Nick Beckich, who is an author from Canada, have written a very good book about mind control and the capabilities with HARP. So to end it up, I want to give you some advice. Eat healthy, live healthy, avoid stress, detox your body for heavy metals. All the tests that have been done, we have a lot of heavy metals. If we eat unorganic food, we get pesticides like Roundup, who actually attach the heavy metals to our body. Communicate and inform, be creative and awake, and use the message to find back. And I will just show you an app me and a friend I play football with have developed in order to tackle this, so you can use your smartphone as a weapon to register what is going on in the sky all over the world. It's called Flight Pollution Radar. Unfortunately, we could not make it free because we have to pay for the server cost and we have to pay for the transponder signal so you know which plane it is. But it's $1 a month, and you will, the more people we get in, the cheaper we will actually make it. It works on iPhone and it works on Android. By this picture you have here is that you get a menu when you use it. You see the planes like in Flight Radar 24. Then you are using it to see what kind of trail does it has. Non-trail, persistent contrail, spreading, non-spreading. You have 4 different kind of choices. You take a picture of it and you press send. And all the data with this, all the transponder signals, data with the altitude, which flight company it is, flight number, where you were, the location of your cell phone, is registered on our database. And we hope a huge community of people will look up, use this weapon in order for us to categorize. Is it the military doing this? Is it civilian? And actually in that way give us an overview how the whole geoengineering is working and in how many countries it's actually going on. And you will see the data you have registered. You can see on Flight Pollution's homepage where you also have a fact chapter where a lot of the things I've been explaining you today is written if you can't remember it. But you can see I've made a registration there in Denmark. So you are really proactive using this, and if a lot of people in the world were doing this, we will have an overview how big is the problem with geoengineering in the world. Just to show you, I'm not the only scientist working with this. There are a lot of good scientists, but in the end, it's like Max said, like Charles said, like everybody said, we are the change we want to see in the world. Thank you for your attention.
Frank Rasmussen. We have some time for questions.
I'll just firstly say thank you so much for that incredibly insightful information. I've been watching the planes spraying relentlessly for the last 5 days, and I've seen hundreds. I've been constantly watching them. I just made a conscious decision today to stop watching them because it was getting a bit obsessive. But interesting the behaviour. There's been 2 or 3 planes, mostly 2. You can tell by the speed and the kind of whether it's twin.
Can you speak a little louder because I have this?
Sorry, but long short is that I've been watching the. I've been a skeptic of chemtrails for quite some time. Most conspiracy theorists I can see are actually valid. This one was one of the few that I was unsure of. But after just even before this talk, just witnessing what's happening in the sky is just no question in my mind whatsoever. And this has just blown my mind. This is one of the biggest things that we need to deal with on the planet right now. And there's so many there's things like linking up, just going, oh my god. And even in Matrix, like we scorch the skies, like how much are we going to before we dim the sky where we can't see blue anymore? This is, and particularly with electromagnetic amplification as well, it's very scary. And I know having a good in-depth knowledge of how the system works and how strategic it is to actually target and control us, that there's no coincidence. There's a high concentration of conscious people here, so we're being targeted right now, and that's a scary thing, like looking, who knows what they're spraying, but I also realize that some things that you just got to deal with and go, okay, well, I can't be in the state of fear about that. I just got to go, well, it is what it is, and we got to just put the message out there. And this is amazing that these tools and this awareness is just coming out now, and we need to get this out there on a huge scale. So, thank you so much.
Thank you. Just to, while you are finding a new one, also if you look at this in a spiritual way, if we have to think a little bit out of the box, all this shields created around the Earth, I believe an evolution is going on, and we are part of this evolution. And evolution is coming very, very fast. And the powers that be are not interested in an evolution. They want to keep status quo. So even in that, creating a shield all over the world, because all countries are seeing chemtrails and HARP activity. So this is a worldwide phenomenon. So looking at this from a spiritual perspective could also actually try to minimize what the impact we as spiritual being and the earth is doing together with the entities out in space. Of course I cannot prove that, but I wouldn't be surprised.
Frank, I actually have a question. I live in a beautiful place in the south of Portugal, in the countryside. And one day, a Saturday night, I watched a documentary on chemtrails. And on Sunday morning, I actually observed over my land chemtrails, a grid. And I became very disturbed with that. And then I asked a friend, we were talking about it, and he said that he's in Spain, in this organic farm, big farm of herbs. They are using this technology, which is a copper cannon in the ground, and it actually makes a halo. And the chemtrails just...
Okay.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
But, I was going to ask you what your thoughts are about it, because even if it's not over the land, it will eventually go on the water, isn't it? So, do you know about this?
Not that specific. I have what they call a chembuster at home, using argon energy. And if you search in William Reich, argon energy is a pretty amazing thing. It cures cancer, it can do a lot of things. But I actually bought it because I was in despair. I want to do something about it. I believe it works, and we have a group of a lot of Danish people with their own chembusters where we are writing together about our experiences. And what I see from all the mails coming in with the experience they have from their house is that it has some kind of effect. And the funny thing is that most of us, when we put up the chembusters, we actually have a black helicopter coming down. I even took a photo of it. I was just saying, oh fuck, they're coming after me now. And the other guys who had the chembuster also actually had, many of them, a visit by the black helicopter. So it's doing something about the fields in the atmosphere, I believe, but I cannot promise it. But the work of William Reich, and I didn't have actually time to study it yet, is very important, and he was prisoned for many years. So I'm sure that what he invented was something very fantastic, which we're not allowed to experience by the powers that be.
Okay, that's about all the time we have tonight for Frank and Geoengineering. Let's get a big round of applause to Mr. Rasmussen from the Open Mind Conference.